So the Imperial Officer is one of the most iconic pieces of imagery from within the Imperial Military. It's up there with the Stormtrooper and the Star Destroyer for icons of the Emperor's power, but I figured today we could take a closer look at their uniform and why they dress that way. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. Now, before we get any deeper, I'm not going to go over why militaries wear uniforms. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It's a way to present uniformity and sort of a sense of togetherness, that this is operating as one entity as opposed to a bunch of individuals. I'm going to be focusing more on the sort of history of the uniform and its components. So let's start with the history of the Imperial Officer's uniform. Well, it dates back to the days of the Old Republic, like a lot of other things from the Galactic Empire. Very similar uniforms were first seen worn by Republic officers on board Venator-class Star Destroyers and other similar-sized capital ships. That's likely where this uniform got its first start. Now, it's also likely that these probably predate the Clone Wars, but this is just the first time we saw them on screen. So it makes logical sense that when the Republic transitioned into the Galactic Empire, that the uniform style just simply kind of carried over. With a few in-betweens, we do see some slightly modified versions of the uniform during the end of Revenge of the Sith. So that's how we got to the uniform worn by Imperial officers. Now let's talk about some of the little differences, starting with color. There are several different colors of Imperial officer uniforms, but there are three major ones. An olive drab or a gray color, a black uniform, and a white uniform. The olive drab or gray are two of the more common colors, and we see those primarily within the Imperial Navy. These are worn by higher-ranking naval officers, things like captains, lieutenants, and most of the officer ranks. However, with the exception here being that black is worn by enlisted officers within the Imperial Navy, so lower-ranking officers and engineering crew, and so on and so forth. That brings me to the black uniforms, which are worn not just by lower-ranking naval officers, but also by army officers. Officers within the Stormtrooper Corps would also wear this color as well. Last but not least is white. Now, we see white used predominantly within the Imperial Security Bureau, or the ISB, the Secret Intelligence Service of the Galactic Empire. But it seems to be more versatile than that, with white uniforms also being used by Grand Admirals within the Imperial Navy, so it's seen in multiple places. The uniform itself is made up of a tunic on top, a pair of sort of extended pants on the bottom, a pair of riding boots, as well as a hat. There is an Imperial code disc pinned to the front of the hat, and on either side of the uniform's tunic are a series of code cylinders. These, by the way, operate like a key card, allowing Imperial officers to enter rooms that they're supposed to, and denying access to those that don't have the proper credentials. But on top of that, there's this little plaque. Now, this plaque is probably the most prominent piece of the uniform, and it signifies their rank. Now, it's worth noting that some officers seem to choose to forego wearing the hat. Now, I don't know whether this is a personal preference or something that just comes with rank, but some officers, yes, do choose not to wear a hat. It's also worth noting that some of the higher-ranking individuals, particularly within the Navy, things like Grand Admirals, for example, would add gold shoulder boards to their uniform to add a level of elegance to it. Now, this was rather rare, and once again, this was only within Grand Admirals within the Imperial Navy, but it was a modification that was seen on multiple individuals, but most notably Thrawn. The last element of the uniform, which I kind of forgot to mention earlier, was a belt. They wear a belt through the middle of their abdomen, and it just kind of keeps the uniform looking tight and tidy. It's interesting to see that these uniforms actually did have a couple different variants, though. Most notably, a lot of branches had a sort of dress uniform, which is what we see a lot in the Imperial Navy, for example, and a battle uniform, a version of this that was more like plated armor with a helmet, and this would be used primarily within the Imperial Army, but we saw it used elsewhere as well by officers when they had to go into combat situations. In some cases, the elements of the uniform would actually transfer over to the armor. Like, for example, a lot of army officers will wear their rank plaques on their armor as well as on their uniforms. It's interesting to note that we don't see code cylinders transferring over, but one can infer that while a dress uniform would be worn, say, within the corridors of a secured Imperial warship, the armor would be worn in a situation where they could conceivably be taken captive, and perhaps having the credentials to enter highly restricted areas would not be something you want to take into combat where you could be taken prisoner. Ultimately, though, the Imperial Officer Uniform was worn by multiple different branches, and maybe one that you haven't heard of before, the Imperial Army. If you'd like to learn more about the Imperial Army, I'll leave a link up here to a video I have on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think the Imperial Officer Uniforms are elegant enough for the Galactic Empire. After all, the Empire seems to be a lot of pomp and circumstance. Do you think it would make more sense for them to put something fancier, like more gold or more elegant trimmings on their uniforms, or does this make sense for the sort of utilitarian views of the Empire, where everything seems to be kind of the bare minimum? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.